just to give everybody a background, so Amy and I met, we tried to figure out how many years ago it was the last time we
Many.
spoke. Long enough. But we were both working together in corporate wellness at the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. And I'm going to get into some of that stuff a little bit later, but we've been able to stay in touch through LinkedIn, and I've followed a lot of Amy's research. And I'll let you kind of go into more detail on that, Amy, like what you did. But for me as a professional in fitness, wellness, a little bit of everything, I really like to take a comprehensive approach with people and really a collaborative effort, leaning into research from people I trust and sharing that knowledge with others and taking that when I build programs. So it's not just cookie cutter programs or things like that, that unfortunately I think the fitness industry is kind of flooded with. Which it's not all bad. It's not all good. It's, you got to kind of fit, use what fits with you. So Amy used to put out, I think it was your monthly roundup of like research articles. And I so looked forward to them. And now she has a podcast so I can listen. And it's so informative to me for what I do. And I hope I can share some of the research that she's found with you guys. But Amy, if you want to just kind of let them know a little bit about your research and what you've done, that would be great.
Yeah, I would say my roundup started years ago, and that was really me trying to sift through the articles on physical activity that I saw in some of my favorite media sources and compile them and share them with people. I think my blog takes it one step further, where I actually go to the peer-reviewed published article and I go through the study myself and I try to interpret it for others, because I think that's a really important piece of what I do as a mixed methods researcher. I do my own research, but I try to interpret others' research so that it has impact and meaning for more people. And so one of the blog series that I've done is specifically around COVID and physical activity and trying to understand, and when I first started doing this, it was early in the pandemic. And so there weren't that many research studies coming out. So as soon as I saw something come out, and usually it was around, I'd say there are two streams of research around COVID and physical activity. One is the impact that COVID related restrictions are having on physical activity levels. And not surprising, when you close parks and playgrounds and health and fitness centers and community centers and offices, places that people go to be physically active, not surprisingly, when you close those down, physical activity levels decrease. And so I've looked a lot at the research coming out early days in China, in Italy, the impact on physical activity levels. And I think one of my favorite studies talks about, favorite not in a good sense, but most impactful studies, shows that I think physical activity levels in the United States, based on a survey of over 3,000 US adults, is that physical activity levels had dropped about 33%, and not surprisingly, screen time and sedentary activity had increased about the same amount. So I'd say that's one stream of research that comes out. The other stream of research, which I think is interesting, equally interesting, and perhaps more surprising, is the extent to which physical inactivity and obesity have been shown to be incredible risk factors for severe illness from COVID. And one of the most interesting studies I saw was out of England, where they were able to attribute severe cases of COVID that resulted in hospitalization. And they looked at almost the entire population. They have incredible data in England. And they were able to show that about half of the hospitalized cases could be attributable to physical inactivity, obesity, and smoking. And that certainly gives us pause as we think about the impact of modifiable lifestyle and habits and the impact on risks for COVID. And of course, we're talking about COVID now, but and we have these two pandemics, the infectious disease pandemic meeting the chronic disease pandemic, and obviously we need to find our way out of the infectious disease pandemic. But when we're looking ahead to our ongoing physical inactivity and chronic disease pandemic, we really need to think about these modifiable factors, these risk factors.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we've always known, or at least from me and my education, like 80% of chronic diseases can be prevented. And these are the things that we can control. But it's always that motivating factor, which I want to get into a little bit as well. But I think for people on and listening that, I want to try and provide this really great resource with real information for them. And I'm curious to know, I guess I could do a poll, but even for me, understanding that physical inactivity was considered an actual pandemic. And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was somewhere between 2010, 2014. It was listed as that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was 2012.
Okay.
Really confirming what you who've worked in this field for so long and I who've worked in this field so long have recognized. And it's challenging, what does that official designation really do? It adds legitimacy to it. It heightens awareness around it, certainly.
And do you think, because the pandemic has also really shined a light on mental wellness, mental health, because people who have experienced anxiety and depression, I've read, are experiencing more intense levels of those symptoms. And those who never experienced depression or anxiety are now feeling that. And having or suffering from those can lead even the most motivated people to not want to exercise or move their body. Do you think that in any way the shift after COVID um, do you think it will help, like maybe take some emphasis off of physical inactivity, obesity, tobacco, and put maybe that mental health will help us work on these controllable factors?
My hope is that there will be heightened awareness around mental and behavioral health, and there will be heightened awareness around physical inactivity. And where the two meet would be my goal for focusing increased attention. As you and I know, there's such an important link between mental health and physical activity. And so I'm hoping that a focus on one will not take a focus away from the other.
Sure. And so one of the questions that just came in was, why do you think the pandemic caused such low levels of inactivity? I think we touched upon a couple things with like gyms, offices, parks closing, maybe the depression. Can you think of anything else that might have impacted that?
Yeah, I would say definitely access. We know how important it is to have access to places where people can be physically active. I personally live in a very urban area, and so we don't have a yard. And so we rely on our community parks and playgrounds. And just anecdotally, in March, trying to go and find a field where we could play sports and be active as a family was impossible. We had police patrolling and sending us home when we were there playing soccer. That's just anecdotal. But I do think it's access to fitness centers, community centers. I think active commuting is an important piece of that as well. People weren't commuting to work, and those who do commute by foot or bike were not. We also had we still currently do. We have a curfew here. We're allowed to be out after 9:30 if we're walking alone. So there are um, exceptions made for physical activity. And that was one thing that I thought was really important with the lockdowns in the UK, for example. There were exceptions for people who were out alone being physically active. So a real recognition of the importance of physical activity.
It's interesting you say that because I chuckle because I was in the woods alone exercising a month or two ago and was followed by someone and had to have my husband come and pick me up, and it was kind of a scary situation. So when you talk about access, it's good because you want to highlight the good steps that are being taken, but we also need to provide even more access to safety features and ways to promote. I mean, safe exercise is always something I try to teach people about, progression without negative consequences, whether that's physically, mentally, reducing injury. But it's just interesting to hear you say, oh, we can stay out if we're alone. But I
Yeah,
guess
yeah, no, and it's a really, what a luxury for me to be able to be out alone and be safe in my neighborhood. You mentioned my podcast, and I should have followed up a bit more, but my podcast, the purpose of that is to really elevate thought leaders who are doing really innovative, interesting work in this space of trying to connect healthcare, health and fitness in communities. And an innovative thought leader I had on my show was JL Alexander, who's the CEO of Black Girls Run. And she talks a lot about accessible physical activity, specifically around safety, because they're not being physically active in a wellness, a worksite wellness center. They're not they're community based, but they're not within the four walls. They're actually running clubs, and so safety is a really important piece of what they discuss with their members and they advocate for.
yeah, that's great. Um, so with all that said, someone had sent in a question, and this is probably something you and I could talk for a long time about. 2020 was obviously a difficult year, and so far the beginning of 2021 still proves to have its challenges. There was no switch that was just flipped. So in terms of people finding their motivation, and I should let everybody know that Amy is also a personal trainer, group fitness instructor. So while you work with Move to Live More, you have your doctorate in public health. You really have embraced all aspects of health and wellness. So when it comes to people finding their motivation to get through this, what are some recommendations that we as professionals can make to help them find their motivation?
It's such a great question, Karen. And you were too modest when you talked about how we first met. You managed the fitness center where I came to teach group exercise. And so that is how far back we go in our connection to helping people be more physically active individually, small group classes, and that is the basis of my passion for the industry and helping people be more physically active. I've really struggled personally with my motivation now, going from someone who taught group exercise 3, 4, 5 days a week. And when I wasn't teaching, I was going to the fitness center where I taught, but going to other instructors' classes. And not having that now and doing it alone at home online and trying to find the time to do that has been really challenging. And so I've never made New Year's resolutions before. And yet I found myself this year trying to reset and really say that I would get 12,000 steps a day and I would participate in 3, 4, 5 classes, short 30-minute classes, and trying to reset for myself, because I think the biggest challenge is the habits that we worked so hard to establish to be physically active and helpful have been completely blown up as things have been shut down. And so trying to reestablish habits, trying to establish new habits for now. And then for me, when the health and fitness centers open up again, I'll need to reassess. But I do think that there's a great challenge in trying to establish new habits, and a great opportunity to really assess and reassess. For me, a really important motivator is actually writing it. And I'm old school. I have like a physical calendar. I have many
We're very
digital
similar.
I have many digital calendars
That
as well.
blends into my background even.
Yeah, yeah, no, I like it. But I found that actually writing down what I plan to do to be helpful. And I'm taking a page out of another of the thought leaders who appeared on my show, Open Source Wellness. Um, they connect healthcare to communities, and they focus on eating, move. I think it's nourish, move, connect, and support. So I tried to take healthy eating, movement, uh, social connection, and support. So I'm trying to, talk to a friend once a week, and de-stress. I work all the time, so I'm trying to take one day off a week. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in a pandemic, I feel bad taking a day off. So it's just been the resetting. So I think that's me anecdotally. I think that I've had behavior change experts on my podcast, so I'll defer to them. And I do think the establishing healthy habits for oneself, they can't be imposed by other people.
Right.
In order to bring about sustained behavior change, it needs to come from within, intrinsic motivation. And a huge piece of that, I think, is finding something that you truly love to do.
So that you have to force yourself to take a day off, right?
Right. 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 Exactly. Exactly. And then it doesn't feel like a chore. I had a behavioral health expert talk about, being healthy habits as a gift instead of a chore.
That one. Yep. That really resonated with me because on the podcast, for those of you that probably haven't heard it yet, I was taking the word exercise out because so many people associate exercise with pain, a chore. I've always had this theory that I never liked running because growing up as an athlete, playing basketball, which maybe this is going to sound crazy because you obviously run in basketball, but basketball, volleyball, softball, if you were late or you missed a shot or you missed a serve, you ran. So running or push-ups was always a punishment. And I feel like anyone that's been in that type of situation, it just kind of sticks. Well, I don't want to do this because then I'm going to have to run. And it wasn't until I signed up for the Boston Marathon that that I realized I like running, maybe not in that amount. But it was something that I was doing really to raise money for a family member that had cancer. And I went from not running to completing the Boston Marathon and raising money and connecting with a whole bunch of other people. So finding some motivation towards things that you enjoy, I think, is really critical to anyone's long-term success, because you're always on this like improvement continuum, right? Like you can write down to make time for 5 minutes of something, and then tomorrow maybe it's 6 minutes, or maybe it's 1 week at a time. You build on a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I've been lucky through connections on LinkedIn. I've never met her, but I communicate a lot with a woman who really focuses on play and physical activity as play.
Mhm.
And I think we have a lot to learn from kids on this. And one thing that I've done both personally and professionally is tried to advocate for more physical activity in schools, and I do this at the local level here. And one thing I really struggle with is my kids Zoom PE class is essentially they play rock scissors paper, and the person who loses has to do some sort of exercise, so it's punishment. And so, we've opted, if my daughter says I want to go outside and play instead of participating in Zoom PE, that is something I wholeheartedly support. I want her to associate movement with joy and not punishment.
I love that. I mean, I don't love the other aspect of it, but I love that you're supporting that. And I think if we can have that perception and that view of what exercise, you can define it any way you want to define it, really. And what's interesting is I was thinking back and like writing the outline for today. I think, and most people on the call today are people who participate in my corporate programs. So they're employees where the employer has opted to offer my programming, and I try and tailor all the programs to a unique business and their needs and their culture. And what is sort of funny is, a lot of people are intimidated. And I always tell people when we start, a corporate wellness program is not your boss forcing you to exercise with people you don't want to. It's educating people and providing them an opportunity to find something they like that they can grasp onto and know that it's encouraged and it's supported. And there's still that intimidation factor. And where you and I met at the Fed, this was in the basement of a skyscraper. This gym it was actually a really cool gym. You walked in and there was the desk. I was usually there. There's the ellipticals and the Nautilus all around the back. And then it went into the free weights. It was kind of like a horseshoe. And then right smack in the middle was the group fitness center. No walls, just this big dance floor like you were at a wedding. And all the treadmills were lined up along the back side. So I remember having to teach my first class, and everybody's like lifting on one side. You've got people on the treadmills in the back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get these people moving. And it's been said before by many people that have started to, these programs take time. So as people start to participate more, they say, wow, I didn't realize what this program entailed. And now that I've done it, like I'm over that intimidation factor. And I just think that's the intimidation is also a big roadblock that gets in the way of people's motivation. Well, this is what happened before, so I don't want to do this. And I know one of the things that you really like is the community aspect. And that's something that I really like. And in the corporate world, which is what I'm the bulk of any 360 fitness is really, I do work with individuals, but in that community aspect. So do you have research or any other fun tips to share about building culture or community, or kind of how that affects intimidation and maybe increases participation?
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely highlighted something that's really important to address. And I think that health and fitness centers have found this with members who feel that they have to get in shape before they can join and come to a health and fitness center. And if the industry is going to reach beyond the 20% of the industry that they currently serve. They need to be more about helping fit people get fitter. They need to be more accessible to a larger segment of the population. So, really needing to address that intimidation piece. I think it's interesting that you highlighted that center where we first met, because it was the only place where I taught, and I used to go around town during my lunch hour and teach. And I love the corporate fitness facilities because of the social support piece, and always having the same people religiously come to my classes. And if someone wasn't there, they would check on each other. Oh, we missed you in class the other day. Oh, I heard your ankle's bothering you. And so I do think in a corporate setting, in a community-based health and fitness center, in a walking program setting, I think social support is absolutely critical. I think the research backs up what I know in my gut, what you know in your gut, what I've experienced personally. I always talk about, why do I have a 12,000 step goal instead of 10,000 like everyone else? And it's because I did a worksite wellness challenge years ago at my employer, and I was able to pull in social support. So my walking buddy is my now 80-year-old mother, and
Love it.
she pushed me to up from 10 to 12,000 steps. And I'll never forget, one night at 11 o'clock, she's out walking the neighborhood because she didn't want to let me down. And to add even more to this, my dad called me to complain about this, but they live in the suburbs of DC, and there was actually a bear loose in the suburbs. And despite that, my mom was out walking to get the steps because she'd made a commitment to me as her walking buddy, and she wanted to get the steps. And we ended up winning the wellness challenge, but that wasn't, a gift card wasn't the prize there. It was us partnering to lift each other up. So I think the research, my anecdotes, and I think what we all know to be true, how important social support is to overcome intimidation and to establish long time habits.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm glad she survived and didn't have a run-in with the bear also.
No bear.
Your mom sounds kind of competitive like me. Like as we're talking, I'm like, I should highlight that that fitness center that we keep referring to did have the highest participation rate of that entire network. And that was out of about 21, I think, fitness centers at the time, all within Boston and the surrounding suburbs as well. So that was it was fun. And that's what I hope to try and bring into some of my new clients that I work with. And, COVID definitely has made us pivot a little bit, and there's a lot that's being done on Zoom, like today, even. And, it kind of reminds me, maybe we need to go back to one of the first challenges that we did was a buddy challenge to try and pair someone who was in the building with someone who was working remotely as a way to stay connected outside of the work emails and the meetings and push each other to that was, I think, pretty simple. It wasn't even really steps. It was kind of logging some workouts, drinking water, just making sure you checked in with each other. um, so
I
with
think,
all that said,
yeah, that's
um,
a great idea.
yeah, we had some pretty good success with it. I think we need to, now that I'm like thinking out loud, like, okay, we may need to do that again. Um, so in terms of technology and Zoom wearables, this is what I saw you, the panel that I saw you on, and in talking with people, I did get a question, like which wearable is the best? And my answer is always, well, the one that you prefer, but do you have any insight you'd like to share for people?
I'm with you. I think it's the one that you'll use. I mean, I'm not, just to compare and contrast me sitting on that panel, I'm the behavior change person. We had a lot of tech people on that panel and one from the American Heart Association. I remember I sat next to him at dinner and he sort of shows his arm and he's got, these wearables all the way up on both arms. And so he clearly uses them. But I know when I was doing my doctoral research and talking with a member of my committee and she was very skeptical of wearables and just said, I've been given a Fitbit every year and I just stuff it in the drawer next to the other Fitbits. And so to me, it's one that one that you'll use. And I'm kind of low tech. And I use a Fitbit. I've used a Fitbit for years and years and years. I'm comfortable with it. I know it. My mom uses a Fitbit and my son uses a Fitbit. So we can support each other and cheer each other on. So I'm sure the Fitbit's not the right one for many people. It happens to be the right one for me. I know the high tech people on that panel were talking about Apple Watches and they had the 18 up the arm so they could show. But to me, it's really just like finding the physical activity that you will do that you love and brings you joy, finding the wearable that it doesn't necessarily have to bring you joy, but it can't bring you frustration. If you're constantly trying to figure out what it's trying to tell you, I think, we don't need other things to make us feel tech illiterate. We need things that will that will raise us up and add to it. So I think you and I have a similar instinct on that.
Yes, I agree. I did definitely look some of those panelists up on Strava and some other apps that I heard them mention they were on. But yeah, I know this is everybody's lunch, so I don't want to take a ton of time, but I thought I would ask anyone if you guys have any last minute questions for Dr. Amy Bantham, and we'll see if any come in. But I think this was really great. I love shedding light with other professionals and kind of sharing stories. And I'm a one person show right now, so sometimes I'm like, oh, are you guys sick of just hearing from me? Like, and I love to
Yeah,
collaborate with other.
I love this. Yeah, no, I think I'm so glad that you are doing it, sharing information with you, Karen. I always learn so much about the corporate wellness space.
Well, thank you for your time. Everyone's just saying thank you. This is not
Oh,
when we open the beer. We have I'm really fortunate that I have a really fun group of people to work with and I get to stay connected with everyone. So with that said, I want to thank you and hope maybe we can do this again sometime with a different topic and we'll see what people kind of gravitate towards. But
I'd
um,
love I'd love to. Yeah, I'm always looking for interesting topics, talking with people. I'm all of a sudden I learn about something that I never knew about. So I love sort of going down that rabbit hole. And as I said, I keep looking into the COVID and physical activity research. So there's always new and interesting information to report out on.
Awesome. Well, I'll keep an eye on it. If you guys want to check out her podcast or the blog, it's movetolivemore.com. It's one of my favorite sources of information. So thank you for everything, Amy, and it's great to catch up.
It's great to catch up. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here with you, and your the questions and support from the attendees were wonderful. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you guys have a great day.
Bye, everyone.